Hello my sweet angel besties, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking through the 25 books I want to read in 2025, aka my 2025 priority TBR. I do this video every year, so I will leave the previous year's videos down below in the description in case you want to check those ones out. But last year I was absolutely determined to complete my 2024 TBR, like the 24 books that I wanted to read in 2024. And for the first year ever, I completed the entire list and I am so happy about it. I'll put all of the books on the screen that were on last year's TBR. And like I said, I completed this list. I will say I did DNF one of these books. So I can't fully say that I read every single one, but to me a DNF is still counted as completing it. And the one book that I DNF'd was The Immortalists. I tried to read it on two separate occasions, like months apart, and just could not couldn't get through it. I'm not saying I'll never touch it again, but for now it is not a book that I'm making a priority. But it's just so exciting saying that I completed one of these lists, because like I said, I've been doing this for years and this is the first time that I've been able to say that. And we had some really great reads come from last year. I had 2 5 stars from last year that were on this list, which were Out on a Limb and The Final Empire. I'm looking at my list that I had from last year. But we also had multiple 4.5 star reads as well, like Jade Legacy, The Storied Life of AJ Fickery, One Dark Window. I rated The Right Move very highly, and then we also have plenty of 4-star reads as well. Like, there were so many really good reads that came from this list, and so I'm just very excited about that. And it also makes me even more motivated going into this year's list, because I'm like, hey, I can actually do this, I can actually complete this. And every year I really do put a lot of effort into this list. I really do try and think about it for a while to make sure that it's books that I want to read or want to pick up or want to get to. The way that I make my list every year is I pick books that are not new releases. That's kind of like a whole separate thing to me. I don't know why, I just feel like they should be separate. And there are many reasons, I guess, why I add certain books to this list, and I guess I'll go through those as we talk about the books. But even just like looking at the list that I've got for 2025, I'm genuinely so excited about this list, and I really do think there will be so many incredible reads that come from this TBR. So let's just get straight into it. The first book on this list is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This is just like a cute little rom-com, and I've heard so many people have a lot of fun with this book. I feel like Christina Lauren for me is very hit and miss. I feel like I've not read that many hits, but quite a few misses from them. They're not bad, but they're just not like amazing. And once you read Love in Other Words and you just love it so much and you just think all of their books are going to be like that and they're not, it's just so disappointing. And so I feel like I just haven't picked up any of their newer releases as the years have gone on, because I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not that excited about them. However, I have heard so many good reviews about The Paradise Problem. I honestly don't know much about it. I'm not going into this book expecting it to be the best book I've ever read in my life. I'm just kind of going into it to have a good time. But yeah, this just looks like a lot of fun. And I also try to create this TBR with a really good range of books. Lots of different genres, lots of different lengths of books. Like, I don't want to just have 25 500-page novels, you know what I mean? Like, I want to have a lot of different types of books in this list. But yeah, this is a rom-com that I am really excited about. Another book that I'm very excited about is Glow of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is the second book in the Kindred's Curse saga. This is book 1. I read the first book in this series in 2024 and I really enjoyed it. It was a 4.25 star read for me. And I don't know why, but I just have a feeling that this series is going to be a 5-star series for me. I obviously didn't rate the first book 5 stars, but I have really high hopes for this series. I don't even know why, but there's just like a feeling that I have that I'm like, I think I'm really going to enjoy this. Obviously I could be wrong, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. I've also heard a lot of people say that the second book in this series, I think there are only 3 books out at the moment, by the way, but it is an unfinished series. But I've heard a lot of people say that the second book in this series is phenomenal, and so that has got me very intrigued. I feel like the premise of this series isn't anything insane as of yet. It is honestly a very classic romantasy fantasy kind of plot so far, but there seems to be a lot of hidden secrets, a lot of things that I know that we don't know yet, and that has just got me very intrigued. So very excited to continue this series. Also, a big goal of mine this year is to actually complete the series that I'm in the middle of, because I have started and not finished so many series. So it's quite a few books on this list that may or may not be continuations of series that I've already started, but also some new series as well. The next book that I really want to get to is The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. This book was so hyped up in 2024. I feel like I heard so many people talking about it, especially in the Australian book community. I'm not sure why it had like a bigger impact, at least in my opinion, in the Australian community, or at least that's just like what I noticed. This book came out in 2024. I saw so many people raving about it. It also had a lot backing it from the publisher, which I always find it really interesting to see which books get like a lot of hype from their publishers, and you see a lot of like, I don't know if it's like budget put into it, definitely a lot of time put into it, and I'm always intrigued as to why that is, and this is one of those books. And I saw a lot of my Australian creator friends read it and love it, and they just convinced me that I wanted to pick it up, and I just like hadn't got around to picking it up. But I bought my own physical copy of it at the end of last year, and I was like, okay, this is a book that I definitely want to get to in 2025. What I know about this book is that it is a fantasy book, it has a romance in it, and it has trials. I've heard people say that it's like a cross between Hunger Games and Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I obviously know the Hunger Games, but I've never read Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, so I obviously like can't really say much about that, but I think it's because it has trials in it like the Hunger Games, but it also has this element with the Greek gods, and the Greek gods get to put forth a person, like a mortal, that they want to fight to represent them. So like the Greek gods are up here watching, and then the mortals are the ones who are actually fighting, and I think if that Greek god's mortal wins, I'm assuming there's a big prize. I haven't looked into it, but that just sounds really fascinating to me. I will say I did put it off a little bit because as soon as I heard that it had a lot of like Greek god sort of stuff going on, I was a bit uninterested, only because I've never read a book that includes Greek mythology that I've been obsessed with. I've liked it, but I've never been obsessed with it, and it's also a subject that I do not have a lot of knowledge about. I'm not against it by any means, but I just sometimes get a bit intimidated by Greek mythology in books because I'm like, am I not going to be able to understand this fully? Like, I'm not sure if I am the demographic for this book, but I've heard that you don't really need to have much knowledge about that going into it. So I have been convinced. Also, some people that really love this book, I feel like I have very similar taste to, so that's also convinced me. But yeah, I'm very excited to go into this book in 2025. One of the books I am most excited to pick up this year is Beartown by Frederick Buckman. I am just absolutely fascinated by this book. I know Des and Sarah, two of my besties, absolutely love this book, and I just need to experience it for myself. Sarah specifically has been like, Rachel, I am begging you to pick up this book, and we tend to have very similar taste, so I would be shocked if I dislike this book. But it is a bit intimidating because I have heard that, well, first of all, it's a bit of a longer book and it's more of just like a general fiction kind of story, which I do read some of but not a lot of, so it just intimidates me a little bit. But I've also heard that it handles kind of like heavy subject matter, so I am just very intrigued, very excited to pick up this book and hopefully this whole trilogy. All I know about this book is that it is set in a town that is kind of brought together by hockey, but there's been something kind of bad happen. Again, I feel like it's one of those books where the premise doesn't do a lot for it. Like, it doesn't really entice people very much, but I think it's going to be one of those books where you pick it up and you start reading and you can't stop. So I am ready to get absolutely ripped to shreds by this book. I'm not excited for that. I feel like I will be heartbroken over it, but I'm kind of ready for it. Then we have The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. This is Erin A. Craig's newest release. She is also the author of House of Salt and Sorrows and House of Roots and Ruin. She's also got another book called Small Favors, which I haven't read, but the books that I have read by this author I've absolutely loved. She writes kind of like gothic fantasies, and I just find them extremely atmospheric. I love the vibes that she creates, and I think the stories are just very, very interesting. So I honestly don't even know that much about what this book is about in terms of plot. All I know is that this is an author that I really like and I want to read more of her books. So The 13th Child is on my list for this year. Next we have Immortal Dark. This is the ARC copy, which I feel so bad that I haven't read this and I was sent the ARC. Kind of a fail on my part, my apologies, but I am still very excited to get to this. This says it's a romantic dark academia fantasy where a lost heiress must infiltrate an arcane society and live with the vampire she suspects killed her family and kidnapped her sister. And it's the first in a trilogy. I'm not gonna lie, I don't love vampires, but everything else about this sounds fascinating. I love dark academia, as long as it's not too like dark and creepy, but I feel like the vibes of dark academia are perfect. And then the idea of her having to like live on campus, I'm assuming in like a school or something, that sounds really atmospheric to me and really interesting. And also just her having like an enemy right from the beginning sounds fascinating to me. I've also just heard incredible reviews about this. Everyone who I've heard talk about this has had mostly positive things to say as far as I've seen, and even people who haven't necessarily rated it 5 stars have still quite enjoyed their reading experience, so that really sold me. Next we have Assistant to the Villain. This is one I'm very intrigued by because I have seen so many mixed reviews about this book. I've heard so many positive reviews but also so many negative reviews. Some people say that it is very cheesy, just like not good, and then some people say it's so cute and wholesome and fun and just like a good time, and so I just want to figure out how I feel about it. I've heard that it's a little bit more like cozy vibes because I think it's about a girl who becomes an assistant to the villain, and I've heard there's a talking frog, I want to say, that holds up signs or something. I don't know. That part really intrigued me. That part really sold me because I love a little animal friend. I'm not gonna lie. I really can't tell how I'm gonna feel about this one. I feel like it really could go either way. The next book on this list is Ghosted. This is another one that was heavily influenced by bestie Sarah. She has read this like 3 times or something and she just loves it, and that really fascinates me. Also, I have had this book downloaded on my Kindle since I first got a Kindle. I got my Kindle, I got Kindle Unlimited, and it was one of the first books that I downloaded on Kindle Unlimited and like borrowed, and I still have yet to read it, and I just need to. I don't know what is holding me back. I honestly think I just forget it exists, so I feel like adding it to this list could be very helpful to me. I'm not expecting this to be like 5-star revolutionary, but I do think it'll be a fun time. I think it'll be very interesting. I think it's like more of an emotional romance, not like a rom-com, so I'm intrigued by that. Also, I think it's like a One of Us is Famous kind of trope, and that intrigues me because I have enjoyed that in the past with When in Rome and the Happy Ever After playlist, so we will see. I am desperate to read Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I read my first Annabelle Monaghan book last year and absolutely loved it, but they are quite difficult to get your hands on in Australia, at least as far as I have found. I tried to order this online a while ago and they were out of stock, so I couldn't get it, but I am determined to read this book this year. I know she has another book as well, I think. I don't know if she has more than that, but this is the next book that I am very intrigued by because it seems like it has kind of just like the most positive reviews. I think this was originally influenced by bestie Haley because I think she was the first person I saw read it, I want to say, but again, a few of my other besties have read this, loved it, and ever since reading Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan, I'm like, I need to read her entire backlist. Like, I need to. Also have no idea what it's about, but I don't care. One that feels a tiny bit rogue for me is Metal Slinger. I don't know a single thing about this book apart from my bestie Emmy loves this book, and Emmy can probably convince me to read anything because she is someone that if she loves a book, you will know about it, you will hear about it, and I love that. I love it when people get passionate about books because I get passionate about my favorite books, and if I love a book, you will not hear the end of it, so I can really relate. Ever since hearing Emmy talk about this and she convinced Sarah to read it and Sarah enjoyed it, I have just like needed to get it. I also have it downloaded on my Kindle, like it is ready for me to pick it up at whatever point I want to pick it up at. All I know is that it's a fantasy book, and I told Emmy that it was going to make it on this list, and she said don't put your hopes up too high. Like, it is just like a fun time. It's not going to be like the best world building and magic system you've ever read, so I'm not going into it expecting like Throne of Glass 2.0. I'm assuming it's a romantasy. I don't even know for sure. I know it's fantasy, but I'm excited about it, and I've heard that there's something like, I don't know if it's like a cliffhanger at the end or a twist at the end. There's something at the end where everyone is shocked, and that is the part that I'm like, okay, I need to read it because I want to have my own little shocked experience, because that is just like such a fun experience to have in a book. Like when you get to the end and something shocks you, that is just the best feeling. If We Were Villains. This book has been hanging around the internet specifically for years. I feel like it never really goes away. Like there's always someone reading it for the first time and having a really great reading experience, and it's just like one of those books that I always have in the back of my mind. And when I first started hearing about it, I was like, it doesn't really sound like something I would enjoy because I think it's dark academia. It is YA, which is kind of more up my alley, and I think, ooh, is it Shakespeare? Like it's a Shakespeare theatre group or something? Am I butchering this? Let me look. People compare it to The Secret History, and that really stresses me out because I've tried reading The Secret History and I cannot get through it. Actors studying Shakespeare at an elite arts college. Okay, I was on the right wavelength. Wait, this actually sounds very interesting. I've never actually read the synopsis of this book. It says Oliver Marks has just served 10 years in jail for a murder he may or may not have committed. On the day his release, he's greeted by the man who put him in prison. Detective Colborne is retiring, but before he does, he wants to know what really happened a decade ago. As one of 7 young actors studying Shakespeare at an elite arts college, Oliver and his friends played the same roles on stage and off. Blah, blah, blah. Someone dies. The rest face their greatest acting challenge yet, convincing the police and themselves that they are blameless. Like, it sounds really good. But I think the whole Shakespeare thing and the secret history thing, I was like, maybe this is not for me. But I don't think I have personally seen any of the people that I follow say anything bad about this book. Everyone who I personally like watch, I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like the people that I watch have really enjoyed it, and also quite a few of them have been really pleasantly surprised by it. Like, it's not a book that they would normally go for, but they read it and were like, wait, I actually really like this and I was not expecting to, and that has me intrigued. So it's one of those books that I've just had in the back of my mind for years, and at this point I'm like, why have I not read this yet? There is no reason for me to not have picked this up by this point, so I'm excited about that one too. And then we have Anxious People by Frederick Backman. It is very rare that an author makes it onto this list twice. There are 2 authors that have made this list twice this year, and one of them is Frederick Backman. Obviously, like I mentioned, I want to read Beartown, but I also really want to read Anxious People, and I think I want to read this one first, mostly because I already have the physical copy, and also it's not part of a series, it's just like a standalone novel, so I feel like I should read it before going into one of his actual like series. And I'm very intrigued to kind of get a taste for his writing and his storytelling through this book. I've heard, again, nothing but incredible reviews about this. It doesn't seem like it's one of those books that I would love just like hearing the synopsis, but again, so many people that I follow and really like trust their reading taste have loved this, so I want to read it. I think it's about a group of people who are at an open home, and then that open home turns into like a hostage situation. Again, doesn't like sound that interesting to me on paper, but I think once I start reading, I'll be invested. Next up we have Starsight by Backman and Sanderson, the second author that is on this list twice. This is the second book in the Skyward series, which I started last year and obviously just really want to continue. This is a YA sci-fi series, and it is about a girl called Spin, and she really wants to be a fighter pilot. Her dad was a fighter pilot and she wants to be a fighter pilot, but obviously it's sci-fi, so this is like in space. Like, she's not flying planes, she's basically flying spaceships. And in the first book, she is really trying to get into this like fighter pilot school academy type thing and wanting to learn how to become a fighter pilot, I guess. It's just a series that I really want to prioritize and continue because I really enjoyed the first book. And the second Brandon Sanderson book that I really want to get to this year is The Well of Ascension, which is Mistborn Book 2. I read the first book in the series last year, absolutely loved it, and again, I really want to prioritize continuing this series and hopefully finishing it. Like, I'd love to read book 2 and 3. I know that that's only like the first era of Mistborn, but yeah, I would love to finish the original trilogy at least. Maybe I'll continue, we'll see. But the first book was absolutely incredible. It really felt like a grown-up Six of Crows to me, just like the best of people in their fields coming together to complete a huge mission, and there's like this mastermind guy training this younger girl how to be mastermind like him. So it's just a really fun time, really recommend. Then we have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I've read The 7-Year Slip, I've read A Novel Love Story, but I'm yet to read The Dead Romantics, so I just really want to get to it. I've loved both of her other books that I've read, and so I'm like, I need to read The Dead Romantics. I've also heard incredible things about it. I don't really know, well, I do know why I didn't pick it up. Originally when it came out and it was getting hype, there were some things that I heard about it that just made it sound like a book that I wouldn't be into, but after reading both of her other books and just like loving her writing style, loving her storytelling, I think I really want to give this a go. I don't know if I'll love it as much as the other 2 that I've read by her, but I think it'll be a fun time regardless. I also really want to read Gold by Raven Kennedy. Gold is the 5th book in the Plated Prisoner series. I've read the first 4 and I read them years ago, and then at the time the next book wasn't out yet, but since then I think the series has actually been completed, and now that it is complete and I can just go in and finish the series without having to wait for another new release, at least as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong with that, it's a bit more appealing to me. I will say this is not a series that I'm obsessed with, and they are like high commitment books because they're quite long. They're good books, they're just not like great books in my opinion, so I'm like, why am I continuing the series? But it feels so annoying to me to have this series unfinished when there's only 2 more books to go and I've already committed to the first 4 books. So I don't know, I'm a bit like, I'm not that excited about continuing the series, but I do want to know what's going to happen, and I do want to complete it and just like feel that sense of accomplishment which may not be a good reason to continue a series, but I think I'm going to do it anyway. Next up we have Wisteria by Adeline Grace. This is the third and final book in the Belladonna series. I read Belladonna and loved it. I read Foxglove and liked it. And like I said, this is the final book. I feel like Foxglove ended in such an interesting way that I'm very excited to see what unfolds in this book. Across the 3 books, you're kind of following 2 female main characters, Signa and her cousin Blythe. A lot of mystery, it's like gothic fantasy, and there's romance. So it does have a few of my favorite things, and it's YA, so it's quite easy to read. But yeah, I definitely recommend Belladonna if you haven't read it already. I feel like it's very hit and miss. Some people don't love it, some people do. I personally love it. I think it's really good, really well written, but I'm intrigued to see the finale to the series. Threads the Pine. I feel like this is one of the books that has been on my physical TBR for the longest. So at this point, I'm just like, I just need to read it. Like, that is honestly why it's on this list, because I just need to read it. I don't even know what it's about. It's fantasy. It's YA. Oh, there's a murder mystery. Maybe also a romance. I also think it is the start of a series. I just need to get to it. There's always like another book that I want to read more, so I think that's my issue. But I am going to get to this book by the end of this year. Then we have Persuasion by Jane Austen. I don't read a lot of classics. I read maybe like one a year, but this is the one that I want to read in 2025, and I feel like putting it on this list will just make it a bit of a priority for me. This is also quite short. I think the only Jane Austen I've read is Pride and Prejudice, and the premise of this one just sounds quite interesting. I'm also quite intrigued by Emma, but that one seems a little bit higher commitment. It's a little bit longer. It's about Anne Elliot, who is no longer young and has few romantic prospects. 8 years earlier, she was persuaded by others to break off her engagement to poor, handsome naval captain Frederick Wentworth. What happens when they meet again is movingly told in Austen's last completed novel. Persuasion is a brilliant satire of vanity and pretension and a mature, tender love story tinged with heartache. Honestly, the premise just sounds very interesting to me. Like, she fell in love with a guy, but she didn't marry him because he was like poor and everyone convinced her not to. And now it's 8 years later, she's kind of getting old, doesn't really have a romantic prospect, and now she's like, what do I do? I'm intrigued. Take a shot every time I say intrigued. Next we have A Voice in the Wind. I actually do have a physical copy of this and I didn't get it out. Now I'm too lazy, so enjoy the photo on the screen for you. But this is a Francine Rivers novel. I've read a few of Francine Rivers' books and loved them. She is a Christian fiction author, and last year I bought this trilogy. I think it's called like the Mark of the Lion trilogy, something like that. And ever since I talked about it briefly on my channel, I kind of mentioned that I'd purchased it. The amount of people that were like, oh my gosh, Rachel, you need to read this book. You need to read this series. Also, my mum really loves this series, so I need to read this series. And I think by putting it on this list, it will mean I'm more likely to get to it, because this is just another book that I just like forget about. So I really want to get to it. I don't know like the actual storyline of the series or of this book. I just know that it's Christian fiction. It's Francine Rivers, and it's apparently very good. Next we have The God of the Woods. I feel like this is a very divisive book. I feel like some people love it. It was some people's like favorite book of the year, and some people were so disappointed by it, and I want to know what I'm gonna think about it. And I don't even know if it's considered a mystery or a thriller, because I've heard some people market it as a thriller and some people say it's not a thriller, it's just a mystery. All I know is that it is set at a campsite. Someone has died, and I also feel like it might be like dual timeline. I don't know. Some people say it's really boring. Some people say it's the best book they've read in a long time. So I want to know what I think of it. I don't read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, so I'm intrigued to see what I think, because I don't really have the best like knowledge of what I do and don't like in a thriller. I also just love the cover of it. Then we have Play Along by Liz Tomford. I have read the first 3 books in the Windy City series, so of course I want to continue it, and this is a lot of people's favorite. I'm very intrigued to see if it's my favorite. So far, I would say my ranking is The Right Move, then Caught Up, then Mile High. Mile High is literally so bad. It's not even like close to the other ones. I just really enjoyed this series. I feel like it has a great sense of found family. There's usually like a good plot as well as a good romance, and I also just want to know why a lot of people say that this one is their favorite. The next book that I want to get to is Emma of 83rd Street. This is by I think 2 authors, but I recently read another book by this author, which was Elizabeth of East Hampton, and I really enjoyed that book. So I was like, well, I want to check out this other book by the same author. I remember this book when it came out, and I remember like seeing a couple of reviews about it, but like not really many. I do think that both of these books are Jane Austen retellings. I'm assuming Emma of 83rd Street is a retelling or a reimagining of Emma, so maybe after reading it I'll want to read Emma. The Ministry of Time. This book has won so many awards. I also think it was like the Dimmicks book of the year for 2024, and I'm just like so fascinated to see what I'm gonna think. I know Bestie Haley read it and absolutely loved it. I think it was one of her favorite books of the year last year, and Bestie Des read it and she absolutely loved it. But based on the premise alone, it doesn't sound like something that would interest me. I know it's got an element of time travel to it, and I don't love time travel, but in saying that, I love the 7-Year Slip, and that has an element of time travel in it. So like, I can enjoy time travel sometimes, but it's not really like a trope necessarily that I like go for. But people are just loving this book. I think it could be one of those situations where the premise of it is not as good as the book itself. Like, I say this, I feel like quite often, like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I just don't think the premise sounds that good, but the book is absolutely incredible. Lessons in Chemistry doesn't sound that interesting based on the premise, but absolutely incredible. There are just some premises that do not sell a book to me, and I hope and I think that this could be one of those situations. So I want to read this book this year. Also, Dimmicks has like a special edition of this book that's like pastel, and I really want it. Do I really need to buy a special edition of a book that I haven't read? Maybe, because it's pastel and it's really pretty. And the last book on this list, the 25th book that I will read in 2025, is Remarkably Bright Creatures. This is another book that I have just known about for quite a long time at this point. It's always just been lingering at the back of my mind. Like, I always just see it, I hear about it, I notice it when I go to the bookstore. Like, I just feel like I can't get it out of my brain, and I finally thought to myself, this must be a sign. Like, I just need to read this book. Also, I've had a few people say to me, you need to read this book. And I'm like, why? What is it about this book that makes you think I'm gonna love it? Not sure. Don't know a single thing about this book apart from maybe talking octopus. Is that right? I feel like I heard someone say that it has a talking octopus. And that, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, put me off at the beginning. Like, that was like one of the first things I heard about the book. They're like, oh, it's got a talking octopus. I was like, no. But then so many people were like, you should read this book. And some people say, this is my favorite book of the year. And I'm like, what is it about this book? I want to find out for myself. So that has made it onto the list. But those are all of the books that I want to get to specifically in 2025. Not gonna lie, I may have already read some of the books on this list. Stay tuned for my wrap up at the end of the month to hear my thoughts on them. If you've been keeping up with my Goodreads, you may have already seen some of the books on this list pop up on there, but I did make this list at the end of last year. I've only just gotten around to making a video about it, but I did like write the books on this list at the end of last year, so promise I'm not cheating. But I would love to know if there are any books that you're like, I just need to get to this in 2025. Like, what is the book that has been lingering in the back of your mind that you're like, I don't know why, but I just feel like I need to read this because I'm nosy. I want to know. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope I didn't say intrigued about 5 bazillion times. I'm sure I did. But I guess I'll see you guys in my next video very soon. Goodbye.